Welcome to a new episode of the Stateside Reds with me and Mr. Green. This is going to be our first time doing this, but not our last time. So what we're going to be doing in this new show is going to be the history and breakdown of Manchester United through the years. Today we're going to start off with Newton Heath, how they became and how they ended and finally turned into Manchester United. But that's not all we're going to do. We are going to be, after the history of Man United is done, we're going to be breaking down players from their early years all the way up to their career ending at Manchester United. So without further ado, I'm going to get in with our sponsorships real quick. We'll start off with 𝗦𝗶𝗴𝙍. Great t-shirt company. As you've seen last night on the show, Casey wears a lot of them. I've actually going to be signing up for a subscription myself here real soon. So very good quality shirts, subscription service, stickers, the whole shebang. So get over to 𝗦𝗶𝗴𝙍.com and type in our discount code of StateSideReds for 10% off. And then we're also going to start off with 𝗈𝗶𝗴𝙍, your local law firm in LA. I hear that they do some great things anyway, from a slip and fall all the way up to car injuries. I hear they got a huge success rate. So those are our two sponsors for the day. We'll jump right into it. Frank, we got a new camera. We got a new mic. You're looking good over there. So we'll start off. I'll let you dive in because I know you've been dying to do a show with me, and I know you know quite a bit about the Man United history. So when you start us off.
Okay, so thanks for having me again. And,
it's not having you anymore. This is your show. This is your show with me.
Aboard, I guess. Yeah. So I guess if we go back to a time, the mid 1850s in England, and people are starting to move into the cities. Right, these big factories are now starting up, and people are getting rid of their old hobbies. Just to give a bit of context, and this is when sports itself really started to thrive because people were looking for something to do on a Saturday afternoon because they gave up their old hobbies of rabbit hunting and all that kind of stuff. So Manchester itself was a huge textile center. A lot of cotton going through there, a lot of textile being made. It was the biggest, I believe, textile center in Europe at the time. So with that being said, sports started to thrive, and it gave a lot of opportunities for clubs to start. So churches, schools, and industry. So Newton Heath, which is a suburb or a part of Manchester itself, they started up a football club, the Newton Heath L&R-Y Football Club. So Lancashire and Yorkshire Railroad. And it was started up by the carriage and wagon department. So for the first couple of years, that was 1878. First couple of years, they basically played against other railroads, other departments. They wore green and gold back then because that was the color of the railway. So I think their first official game against a big club, if I'm not mistaken, was Bolton. Yep. And it was the Bolton Reserves.
Well, they lost 6-0.
6-0 loss to the Bolton, Reserves. And then they got asked to be a part of so there was two divisions at the time. There was the Football League, mm-hmm. and I believe the other one was the Football Association.
The FA,
so, The FA, yeah. And then they formed at one time to merge into the North. Well, there was the Northern Football League in 1890. It was a 12-team league. So some pretty interesting beginnings. They started up for the workers because, I guess at the time it was just work hard, play hard in the fashion of drinking a lot, and they wanted to do more for their employees, and kind of just, I guess in the 1870s version, a health and wellness program for their employees, and kind of encourage them to do something a little bit healthy. So that was the origins was, Newton Heath, 𝙈𝙊𝙍𝙀. It was actually one of the longest names in football history.
Yeah, it really was. Obviously, when Man United came about, obviously they became a founding members of the combination, a regional football league, following the league's dissolve after only one season. Obviously, Newton Heath joined the newly formed FA Football Alliance, which ran for 3 seasons before being merged with the Football League. This resulted in the club starting officially in 1982 and 93 season. The first club by which time had become independent of the railway company. At this time, it kind of separated, it dropped the LYR name from itself after 2 seasons. The club was relegated to the 2nd division back then.
Yes.
Which, it's one of the only times, I believe, from the earlys up until like the 80s, it's not very many times Manchester United or Newton Heath were relegated at all in the history of Manchester. So, if you dive back into the history of, obviously Manchester back then, like you were saying, it was a hugely area, a lot of buildings where they would build wagons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And me and you were talking yesterday about how the hatred for Liverpool came about. Obviously with Liverpool being the only kind of port, or the biggest port in Europe at the time, being Liverpool, and Manchester having to use that, and in the end, that's why Manchester itself built the canal, that it's still there today. If you've ever seen the canal, to be honest with you, it's very tiny, and I'm very shocked at how some of those ships get down that canal. It's really, it really is a tiny canal. And it's glad that we built it, because it's going to be used to help build our new stadium, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But then you dive into like kind of history, players back then. United were in serious debt. There was a lot of times where United, or Newton Heath, should I say, nearly went under before they eventually did. They struggled to pay. I remember the name of the dog. They had
Major,
yeah. So Major would wear, a bucket around his neck, and he would go around. The kids would pet the dog, and the parents would give donations to Newton Heath back then, which, really kept us afloat. Putting pennies, obviously back then, pennies was a lot of money compared to what it is today. It was a lot for Man United going back then. Just some of the other stuff that, with the Yorkshire Rail Club, they were given a pitch on a stretch of land in North Road.
North Road was their first pitch,
Yeah, close to the railway yard. There was many other clubs in the area, and Manchester and the Manchester Cup competition had been launched. This is kind of a little bit back for Newton Heath. So, when they were around, there was many other clubs in the area. Manchester Cup competition had been launched. The Newton Heath LYR entered in 1885 and reached the final. The following year, they were competed again, and this time they won. Football at this time was attracting a great deal of interest. Nice. I'm glad you've been there. I would actually love to be there myself in Benito. There's a lot I would like to go do in Manchester when I go back in August, rather than just visit the stadium this time. There's a lot more I want to do, and research the history and show my son how United come about. So I'd love to talk with you at some point about some of the areas that going to see. The following year, they competed again. We'll start there, and this time they won. Following this, at this time, were attracting a great deal of interest, and the success of the team was looked upon as bringing prestige to the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Company by the executives, who were quite prepared to make allowances for men to take time off of work in order to prepare for the important fixtures. This is back then. Now, we'll touch on George Best at some point, but it goes all the way up to George Best, because at some point when George Best came over, he had to go work in the rail yards too, because he wasn't allowed to stay in, because he was from Ireland, he wasn't necessarily allowed to stay right off the bat. So there is some history with the rail yards and George Best also.
Okay.
In 1887, Newton Heath reached the final of the Manchester Cup and lost, but the time was now ready for major steps in its history, as football itself took a massive step forward. In 1888, the Football League formed in its first season. Preston North End dominated the league. Who would have thought Preston North End, right? We're talking Preston North End, I'm not even sure where they're at now regarding in the league anywhere.
Yeah. Bolton was a huge club back then. Probably
they were.
The biggest. They were actually kind of the reason why the FA Cup sanctioned professionalism, because Bolton were paying guys under the table, to come and play for them. So it was, the birth of football, so to speak, right? And that right around the time, that's when, because there was different variations of football. There was the rugby version. There was the football version that we have, and the Cambridge rules came in first, and then it was the Sheffield Football Club that basically organized soccer or football as it is, as we know it today. With the 10 fundamental rules.
And let's not forget that it was called soccer back then,
because of it had something to do with the word association and so on and so forth. And
Bandito, you might be able to ask this. I don't think it was it the late 70s, early 80s that it became football in England? It was pretty late that it became football in England. So that's where we're at with that. But we'll dive back in it. It wasn't until 1888, 1889, Newton Heath joined other clubs on the verge of the Football League to form the Football Alliance. In the first season, they finished 8th, which isn't bad. They also played in the first round of the FA Cup, but had misfortunes of being drawn against Preston North End, who we were just talking about, who beat them 6-1.
6-1,
In 1890, I keep, this is how old Newton Heath is. It's like 18. The 1890, another major step came for Newton Heath. They began to sever their links with the railway company, like we said earlier. And the letters FYR would officially drop from the title. The club appointed its first full-time official manager, A.H. Albert. In their second season of the Alliance football, Newton Heath did no better than in their first. Their biggest victory was against Crewe and they're now Crewe Alexander, 6-3, and the biggest defeat was 8-2 to Nottingham Forest. Then in 1982, the Football League again decided to grow. It divided into 2 divisions, the league becoming the first division and growing into 16 clubs. Whilst a second division was formed with other clubs from the Alliance, Newton Heath were invited to join the first division.
With Nottingham
Forest, Preston, the other teams. So the club, which had struggles for all those first 2 seasons, had reached a pinnacle just as the right moment, and now one of football's elites by status, but far from being one of the richest clubs. Newton Heath staggered from financial problems to financial problems, and which we'll dive into with their. I get there with that. It wasn't until 1893 the club left North Road to venture to new ground on Bank Street, which is, Bandito was just telling us about there, in Clayton. At this time, the mud of North Road was replaced by toxic fumes of the chemical works nearby.
Manchester United football grounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, imagine running around with all the toxic fumes everywhere, right? The cost of renting the grounds of the North Road drove them to move. Your mates from Newton Heath, we had mooched around. Nice. It's definitely somewhere I want to check out when we go back over. When I go back over. The cost of renting the ground at North Road drove them to move. Since they had severed links with the railway company, their arrangement for paying for the rent of the ground was ceased. The rent was increased. Football had now become very popular, and newspapers had assignment correspondence to cover various games. When West Brom were beaten 4-1 by Newton Heath, the Observer published a match report that would put them in financial trouble. The article basically claimed that Newton Heath used brutal methods to win their matches. The FA should deal with them sooner rather than later. Newton Heath officials were furious at followed the following year after a season of football that saw Newton Heath still struggle for survival. The Manchester Civil Court judge granted Newton Heath 1 farthing damage. 1 farthing. Come on. I'm from England and I can't even remember how much a farthing was. But it's and order both parties to pay their own costs. This was massive setback for the club. So I'm going to assume a farthing wasn't very much back then, especially if it set the club back even further. That year, Newton Heath became the first team to be relegated. Oh man, were the first team to be relegated? And they remained in the second division for the following 12 seasons.
Yeah, the year they got relegated, they finished with 5 home wins, 1 away win, 2 home draws, 36 goals for, and 72 against.
That's
yeah. In their first season, they finished 16th, but they managed to stay up for some reason. Mm-hmm. But they did have a resounding 10-1 win over Wolves, so I guess that helps a little bit. But yeah, 14 points. They got relegated in the second season. In the first season, they finished 16th on 18 points. So
that's an impressive. That's the but it's 1905, 1906. Hoping I'm pronouncing. Manchester United's first real manager in their third season with the club won promotion to the first division. That year, they also reached the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, but were beaten by Woolwich Arsenal. Way before Arsenal football team came around. In 1907-1908 season, Manchester United won the league championship for the first time. They won in terrific style, 9 points ahead of Aston Villa and Manchester City, winning 23 of their 38 games. The following year, Manchester United won the FA Cup. I think we'll dive in, but we'll go there for a little bit. We'll recap it at the beginning of the next episode. Their game ended 1-0 against Bristol City over after the Cup final success. John Henry Davies had once again shown that his heart as well as his wealth were dedicated to the club and had taken over a chance. He pledged to lend 60,000 and a move to Old Trafford was agreed. That was, a lot of money back then. But obviously, talking, going back to Heath areas. 1902, having debts of 2,670. So that's equivalent of about 400,000 in today's.
And they got a winding up order.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So yeah, they got
North America bankruptcy, like you're done, pay your bills or you're finished, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the captain at the time found a local businessman, John Henry Davis, became the club president.
Did you hear the story behind that?
I didn't. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so the captain, his name was Harry Stafford. Okay, he owned that dog that would go around with the collection tin, the St. Bernard named Major. So this is the folklore that, that Man United, its entire history and where it is now is owed to this dog. So they'd had a 4-day bazaar after this winding up order to raise funds to try and stave off this bankruptcy. So Major, the Saint Bernard, he had this collection tin, and he ran away. He escaped. So he actually ran away, and it was John Henry Davies who found the dog, and his daughter fell in love with the dog. So him and Stafford had met up, to kind of return the dog. The daughter fell in love with the dog, and rumor has it that Stafford made a deal with Davies. I'll give you the dog if you invest in the club and help save us. So Davies, 3 other businessmen, Stafford got together, made that deal, and it's the St. Bernard Major that saved Newton Heath / now Manchester United.
That is an impressive. You know what I mean? Like, could you imagine being back then? Like if that dog wasn't around, who we would be supporting, who our grandparents and stuff like that would have been supporting. It's a pretty crazy story that the dog, yeah, just basically saved us. And then
Yeah.
John Henry Davies and coming in.
Yeah.
It's
Davies
a
was
really good.
yeah, was a good owner, opposite to what we have now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we have an owner like that back, and how things it played out, and it for me it's like it's things like that really encapsulate Manchester United and how they survived because of a dog. Went through all the years, traumatic stories, and in later episodes of how they became the Manchester United. It
Yeah.
really makes me look back. A lot of the research that I've done with these, it's been difficult over the last couple of years with the current owners and not giving a crap, and really like diving into kind of this history of Man United and how they.
Absolutely. When I was researching, one of the things, I think the first thing that Davies did when he cleared all the debt within a year, from his own money.
Yeah.
You know,
Wouldn't that be nice if we had a cheat do that? Right?
absolutely right. Clear the debt. He expanded the stadium on Banks Road from 10,000 to 50,000 before they moved to Old Trafford. He took advantage of a really good opportunity. And being a good guy, good owner, with integrity, put Man United well on its way to where we are today, even though, we could do without the Glazers. But yeah, it helps when you have somebody with integrity and truly believes in the project, right?
Yeah. It's so Stafford was actually allowed to keep the dog, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool that he offered to do that. Tell Ratcliffe to clear the debt like Davies.
Yeah.
I really do believe in my heart of heart that as bad as some of the stuff that Ratcliffe is doing, at least he's trying to do it in the right direction. I think he's just not been dealt a bad hand because he knew what he was doing when he came into the club, but at least he's putting stuff forward. Could you imagine if he hadn't have come in? We would have.
I shudder to think where Man United
we would have
be
needed another dog.
Yeah.
We would have struggled to be around right.
I just struggle with
it. From how much we've won through the 90s, the 60s, 70s, not so much the 70s, but the early 70s, the 90s, 2000s, and then to be in a position where clubs like have just as much money as we do when it comes to that sort of thing. And that's kind of where it is. But that's our first episode of Heath Days. We will be jumping into next week when Man United, and then up to about 10 years, a little bit more after that. I'm gonna do some more research on that because and I'm sure you're gonna agree. It's not just so much the research; it's really reliving the past and how we became about, and it's a good thing to relive those things because I've watched a lot of videos and a lot of DVDs Granddad would give them to me and stuff like that. So, unfortunately, they're not around anymore, so I can't go back. And also, I don't have a VHS
VHS.
player.
Yeah.
And I'm sure even if I did have them, it would be pretty difficult right now to be able to do that. But
Yeah.
definitely gonna try and do some more research for not just knowledge based, but also to kind of relive those sort of things. And that's one of the
Yeah.
great things about doing it. We get to relive the Man United um, check.
Yeah. That time period, the era,
Yeah,
just the neat things, about the Manchester Canal.
yeah,
That's kind of where the resentment started because, Manchester didn't have to pay Liverpool anymore to ship anything, right?
yeah.
And Manchester became the big kid on the block, and things progressed from there. Finding out about the dog, a whole bunch of neat stuff, and a little bit of history about the area as well that I didn't know before. So
Yeah, and there's a lot that I really want to do. Bandito would kill this. Yeah, he would. But uh, I'm glad that you don't think we're killing it, Mikey. Yeah, that's the Man United right there. Yeah, like I've forgot so much about like the early years of Manchester United and stuff. It's great for me to go back and relive those things. Obviously, bring them to you. Obviously, our show will get better. First episode, and trying to fit 10 years of Manchester Newton Heath when there's not much out regarding Heath as its whole. It's been a tough first episode in the sense of for that because there isn't much out there. There's so many conflicting things to Man United. Some of the research I did. Someone says that we didn't wear the green. And some says we did wear the green. There's a lot of conflicting things out there regarding that. So, we're going to be growing. We're going to be doing a lot more, and then, obviously, with the players, and would love to dive into the women at some point. The history of the women's team, the academy teams, stuff like that. It's definitely something we're going to be diving with a show. This is definitely one of the shows that's going to be prominent on the channel, StateSideReds, especially going through the summer. Obviously, there's no games going on. This is definitely going to be a show that's going to be a little more prominent on the show. I'm glad I get to do with you, Mr. Green. So,
I'm glad that you gave me the opportunity. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm the camera's looking good, the mic's looking good. So
I'll have more stuff next time around as well.
Yeah.
I've got a few days off work coming up, so I'll be better organized for the next one.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing too. One of the things that I'd like to do, and I do have it, is I'd like to take a break in between one of these and do a trivia kind of night with everybody. Because I've got a history of a trivia book about Manchester United. I'd love to do, a 20-minute trivia with, where everyone can get in and maybe we can give a prize out for whoever wins. I think that would be a pretty cool thing. Bandino, you're not allowed to participate in that because we all know you're going to win. Man United. So absolutely, you can participate.
Bandito, who came up with the name Manchester United?
Who was it?
A guy named 𝙈𝙊𝙍𝙀.
How did he come up with that?
Well, during this meeting in April of 1902, when they brought everybody together, they were looking at names, and he was just a fan supporter who happened to be there, and he just said Manchester United, and everybody agreed, and they've been known as Manchester United ever since. So
Davies.
yeah, yeah, not anything exciting, but yeah, just some neat stuff about the history. Like you think, oh, it came up with it, and it was just a guy who said, "Hey, how about Manchester United? That's the name. We're going with it."
Yeah.
Right?
But then
You
that's
know?
just like one of those things that always sticks.
Yeah,
But you know, they yeah. Uh, s- oh, it's changing the colors. Was that the stipulation you're on about? Um, was it the calling it Manchester Bandito?
yeah. Davies picked the colors
Yeah,
to
Davies.
play in,
Oh, okay.
red and white. Yeah, and that's when they decided to drop the name because they were no longer in Newton Heath, and
Yeah,
that's when they changed it to Manchester United.
yeah. I did know that when it, you know, moving into Stretford and to the current area of where they are at,
Yeah,
um, which is it's a large area. Kind of what they own, which is nice considering you can imagine a stadium. Uh, obviously, we're going to have to buy certain sections of it for the new stadium, so, but it's still nice to have all of that area
oh, absolutely.
in the phone. Did you send me that through Facebook? Dennis, yeah. But anyways, one of the Newton Heath and Clayton are grim. Yeah, I've heard Clayton is pretty grim. Newton Heath I haven't been to, but Clayton I have, and it is pretty grim. But one of the things I'd love to do, Bandito, if we'd love to have like me and Mr. Green would love to have you on here one time. We know that you're Mr. Man United. We know that you've been more history about Manchester United than I have. And I'm from, I've been to Manchester quite a bit. So we'd love to have you on here one time. That'd be awesome. You can chat away as long as you want. Not bound by time anymore. So to have you, go over some of the things that you've been to in England. Give me some advice, places I should go. So yeah, let me know if you want to come on, man. I'd love for you to come on and chat away about Manchester United and some of the history stuff that you've seen, because I know you've seen, and the story of you going to our old training ground and being allowed in, which was freaking awesome. I don't know if you know, Mr. Green, Vidito got, when he went to England, he was allowed to go to the old training ground. Went to the old training ground and they allowed him to go in and go to Alex.
No way. That's awesome.
I'm gonna try.
Incredible.
Yeah. So what I want, I would love. Yeah, I want you to come on because I want you to tell me that again. I would love for me and my kid to go over there and and that's probably around the old cliff, the call it, but yeah, just definitely let me again. That's our first episode of the history of Manchester United. Me and Mr. Green are going to be working on more of an official name, and a new intro. But until then, thank you everyone for stopping by. Please give a thumbs up, like, share. The algorithm really does help when we get those thumbs up, bumps.
Absolutely.
Again, we're going to come back with a little bit more. Obviously, I'm still working on aspects of learning how to pictures into here, adding more content into into the show. So yeah, 100%. I'll speak to you guys later, Mr. Green. Thanks for jumping on. It is
No
your show
problem.
now, so you don't have to thank for having me. It is actually your show with me. So everybody else,
Excellent.
peace out. We will see you next Wednesday for another episode of the History of Manchester.